Welcome to the Skaterade podcast. I'm Jasmine,
I'm Mac.
and today we are here with accomplished derby skater, artist, veteran, and mother, Kapulani, also known as Hawaiian Blaze. She skates for Team Indigenous Rising and Gotham Roller Derby's very own Queens of Pain. Her artwork as a stained glass artist is both delightful and impactful. We're so thrilled to have a conversation with this powerhouse of a skater and community member.
Hi, welcome.
Aloha. What an intro. I feel very nice. Thank you.
Of course. It's the very least that we can do. And yeah, let's just jump into it. Can you tell us about who you are and also how you discovered roller derby somehow along the way in that answering that question?
Yeah, so I'm Kapulani, like you said, aka Hawaiian Blaze. And I actually joined roller derby in 2014, but in a very interesting, strange way. So I was medically retired from the Air Force after 12 years, and I immediately went into this women's trauma recovery program. And it was like a 6-month inpatient program, which was amazing. And my roommate in the program told me about roller derby. And then that's kind of how I found it.
Wow. Did you jump right in? Basically, like when you found out about it, were you like, okay, sick, I'm going to pursue this thing immediately? Or were you like, oh, okay, like cool, roller derby. And then like it took a while. Like what was that sort of journey?
So I attended the orientation, Arizona Roller Derby's orientation with just to support. That's it. Didn't know what was going on. We were there about like 5 minutes, and I was like, "Take my money, take my soul. This is where I belong." And the next day, I went to the roller rink, and I was like, "What's up? I'm a derby skater."
Cool.
But before that, my experience was pretty much just like birthday parties when I was 8. I really didn't know how to
Mhm.
skate.
Did you have any other sort of like athletics in your background growing up or anything?
Yes, absolutely. So I started dancing hula. I mean, before I could even walk, like it was just so immersed, right, into my family. And so dancing has always been such a source of comfort and joy and strength. And I just carried that throughout my whole life. But then I also got really into competitive soccer. I love the physicality of it. And there was a time where, to please my mother, I was very into cheerleading.
Okay.
I know. So, kind of all over the place, but always had something, some sport, something.
Mm-hmm. And so you said you found derby in 2014, so it's been almost a decade of roller derby.
Almost a decade. It's strange to think about it because like pandemic years makes it seem like, I've only been doing it for about 5 years, even though it really has been almost a decade. I feel like roller derby just came into my life in the most like perfect time when I needed community. And it was just like serendipitous.
I feel like that's something I hear from so many people in roller derby is like something having to do with like mental health or like struggle or something kind of gets us there. And then it's this thing where it's like, whoa, like here's this thing that I didn't really maybe know that I needed or even necessarily know that was like available to me. Yeah, yeah, powerful.
Absolutely.
You said you started with Arizona.
Yes. So I was living in Phoenix, and so Arizona Roller Derby was my first league. And I kind of wore a lot of hats while I was at that league. I did a couple years on the BOT, led training, captains, just all over the place. Anywhere that the league needed someone, I was like, I'm there, I'm in. And then post pandemic, coming out of that, like just kind of a little bit more careful with diving fully like back in, even though I have taken a coaching spot at Gotham, which has been just lovely. I do think that like my derby career has kind of transitioned into a more thoughtful and more intentional time
Mhm.
spent, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
hmm
What do you think contributed to that shift for you?
I think that pre-pandemic, I was so in. I was like obsessed almost, right? Like roller derby just kind of took over,
Mhm.
all aspects of my life, right? And then when skating stopped, it was like, who am I? Like I don't even know who I am when I'm not skating, 5 days a week with weight training 3 days a week and all of these like really intense schedules that we put on ourselves. So it was a realignment of like what I see as priorities for my time. So just like kind of moving into not just a roller derby skater, but all of these other facets.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So speaking about being more intentional with your skating, you're really vocal
Mm.
online about being an Indigenous skater and skating for Team Indigenous. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about the concept of borderless teams?
Right. So we live in a world where colonialization has shaped the face of people. And with that, if you take a look at roller derby, it is primarily a white sport. It is rare to see people of color, indigenous folk, just like people who don't fit the stereotypical, tall, white, blonde skater that you typically see. And Team Indigenous gives you a look of what it could be like if an entire team of First Nation skaters showed up. If we have enough Indigenous skaters to put forth a competitive team, think of how many more could come forth if they even knew that it was available to them. If you can see yourself in a space, then you know that you can do it too. And I think that we give that because we are constantly showing up and just kind of like look at what these beautiful different shaped brown bodies can do, because before us, you'd never seen that in Derby,
Mhm.
So yeah.
Mhm. And especially not in such a concentrated way, right? Like not as a whole team of people who are all showing up
Right.
together as a united front. Yeah, it's such a rarity in the sport.
Yeah, and being so vocal about it, right?
Mhm.
So that's the other thing is that like sometimes in order to fit in the space, you quiet yourself and you try to be not so intrusive in like, I'm Indigenous and these things are important and you should take a look at these issues that are happening, right? When you're the only one, it's so much harder to bring forth those issues that are so present. Having my siblings, having these conversations, and all of us coming from a very specific point where genocide happened, our lands were stolen, the institutions that were put into place to keep us down afterwards, they're still very present,
Mhm.
right? And we can lean on each other and be like, here we are. And here is like something that we would like everyone who lives on this land to recognize. You know what I mean? Just like we all have to kind of own that space. Hmm.
Mhm. And there is something that you said really stuck out to me because I think this also speaks to the power of like good organizing. Because when you are that single voice,
Mm.
it's so much easier for people to look at you as an individual as a problem. Whereas when you have a group of people with you who are all saying the same thing, it's harder to
Yeah.
be individually targeted in the same way, you know? And so, at least in terms of how I have viewed these teams, I'm like, no, this is like really good fucking organizing. Like, this is organizing, you know? And it's been really, really cool to just witness, I'll say. And very heartening in terms of the conversations that have needed to happen within the sport. That being
Yeah.
said, I've understood, again, kind of as someone who's not really in the sport anymore, like y'all have still sort of more or less been targets, even as groups of people. And
Mm,
I'm thinking specifically about like some of the things that happened at BOTAs and like things that I've
mm.
heard through the grapevine around that tournament, other things that have evolved since then. I am wondering if you would be comfortable talking about some of that at all, or if you want to speak to it at all.
Yeah, so I do think that this is a very like personal perspective and definitely not speaking for the team when I dive into this a little bit, because Team Indigenous's stance is that we attended the tournament, some conversations happened, and then there were responses to the conversation, kind of like that. And I do encourage everyone to please read our team statement to kind of understand that perspective. So from my perspective, this tournament was to be states against states, right? So you have your state all stars that kind of battle it out, and they had two diaspora teams. And unfortunately, we were told that we would have to compete against each other in order to have the same resources that the states would naturally have. And it's disheartening because First Nations obviously predate states.
Mhm.
So to say that our invitation would be based on the like other diaspora teams and not necessarily taken at the same space as if you were a state just felt very targeted. And my leadership during their time, they were so amazing and they really shielded us from a lot of the things that were happening during the tournament. And it wasn't until after that we got to talk about it and process together. And I think there was a lot of grief because we all love roller derby so much and we're so passionate about having an equal space. And then to kind of experience a moment where it was very clear that it wasn't an equal space anymore. Yeah, there was a lot of grief to process with that.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and in those circumstances, it's so often the case that the onus is put on marginalized skaters to do the heavy lifting around the dialogues to affect change. And I'm wondering, what are some of the ways you and your borderless teammates have been showing up for each other to support continued resistance since that all happened at BOTAS?
Yeah, so we have really dived in when it comes to coming together as a borderless community and really like building each other up. In fact, this weekend we are headed to Denver for the first borderless tournament. There are going to be, I know I'm so excited.
Uh-huh.
There are going to be 4 teams. So it'll be Team Indigenous, Black Diaspora, Jewish Roller Derby, and the new team, which is Team Fuego, which is very, very exciting.
Mhm.
So and I think a lot of that is just like showing the community that these skaters can not only come to your tournaments, but we can host a tournament and we can make it successful. And like we are adding to a different, like a new layer to the community. You know, it's gonna be really good.
Mhm. And it's such a great perspective for inclusivity for everyone too, starting at that baseline of people that understand how important that is and will put that first. So that is
Mhm.
really exciting.
Hmm. Yeah, and the goal is to. This isn't just like a one-time thing. We are already talking about, perhaps making it an annual tournament and like how we move forward to keep pushing the awareness that these teams are amazing. Mm.
I'm so fucking happy that that space is gonna exist, and, like, yeah, I'm like, Derby has needed this. I'm like, "Ooh." Uh, uh, I can't wait to follow along. How many games are teams playing?
Yeah, so 2 days, and we're gonna play 3 games. So it'll just be like round robin style. Hmm.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. What's the thing you're looking forward to the most? I'm like, can you reduce it to a thing that you're looking forward to the most?
I can actually. Um, we are doing a big ass family dinner. And that means that everybody's invited. Like we're trying to get like all the teams together and just like really bond and build that foundation, like more community based. Definitely looking forward to that.
Mhm, mhm. Damn, yes, that's the way to do it. Yeah, I think it's like something I'm very excited about is hopefully models for doing things differently. I think that is like very needed in roller derby, especially right now. So
I agree.
yeah, I'm very excited. I'm very excited for y'all. By way of borderless teams, what do you hope to leave to the indigenous and other marginalized skaters that are your posterity?
Oh, I mean, so the bonds that I've created with my teammates, ooh, I will get emotional about this
Oh.
because they're so strong. uh, feel like feel like my Ohana back home, and that's difficult because, I mean, Hawaii is so far away from New York City, right? Like, and I don't have any relatives on the East Coast at all. So to have my Team Indigenous family be so present in my life, it's always coming back to home, right? Like it's always coming back to a safe space or a loving space, or sometimes a get your ass up and you need to work space. You know what I mean? Like it's not just a derby team.
Mhm.
Like we know what's going on in each other's lives and we celebrate those things and we grieve those things together. And I hope that when I leave Team Indigenous, I leave it in an even more caring space than what I am in right now, because I would love for other Indigenous people to feel what I feel with that team,
Mm,
to be able to like have that not just like Indigenous joy, but like queer joy and skating joy. Like there's so much to it. It's so powerful. And I really, really hope that I can like pass that on to the next group of skaters, you know?
mhm. When did you start getting involved with Team Indigenous?
My first skating experience with them was RollerCon 2019. So I wasn't in the first charter. I actually learned about Team Indigenous after Champs or World Cup. And so then as soon as they were like, we're opening up for skaters, oh my gosh, I was tappy tap tap tap, send you my life story. Like, yes, please. And so I was able to join in 2019.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
what kind of happened throughout the pandemic with that team? Because my understanding of Team Indigenous is also that y'all are kind of from all over. So it's not like, for listeners that maybe don't understand this, it's not like it's necessarily a local team where folks are all in the same area and then all practicing regularly together. It's, yeah, more spread out. So what kind of was that like for y'all? Did you stay connected? Were you still, involved with one another?
Yeah, I mean, so it is interesting because we are not locally based, right? So I have teammates in Alaska, back in Hawaii, like just all over. And because we have always been a virtually based team, we just continued with that. We were already doing, like virtual call-ins and meetings, and that's actually how we do our training. Is like we have, like right now for prep, we have weekly training meetings where we all meet together and talk strategy, and we are led by the brilliant Daryl. So it's like been such a I know
Love
it's
Daryl.
been such uh I know Daryl's so good. It's been such an amazing thing that we never lost contact, like
Mm,
during the pandemic. We may have like been separated for a bit, then just like came back together. And it's because like that has always been our basis.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Mm.
Daryl. I miss
I
Daryl.
know. I feel so I joined Gotham after they had left.
Mhm.
So I never got to skate with Daryl at Gotham. So I feel so lucky that I still get to like, pick their brain about Derby and like see all these like really cool moments and how they manipulate space, and I'm very lucky to be their teammate.
I felt the same way. Skating with Daryl was always such a pleasure. Very, very smart player, very attuned player. Yeah, incredible.
So, speaking of weathering the pandemic era of Derby, what was it like to get involved with Gotham coming from another league when Gotham was still adjusting to post-pandemic instability?
Right. So we moved. We moved at the end of the pandemic. It was like the end of summer 2021. So when we first got here, I reached out to Gotham, and they were like, "We're still not skating. We are still figuring out our process." And it took a while for them to get back to me, and which, no shade, it was just literally the pandemic, and nobody knew what was going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, we're not taking transfers at this time, but you can come to the basics. And I was like, done, sold. I'm in. Like, if it's basics, I don't care. And so that's kind of where I started. I just like went to basic training, and then they opened it up to like, it was just like an open tryout for everybody. So all the transfers went through the tryout process too. Yeah. It was, I think that everyone came out of the pandemic in such a different space. And I think that Gotham was very much the same. It looks, very different from pre-pandemic when it came to their process and tryouts and all of that.
So you essentially just weren't skating more or less at all during the pandemic, like many people. Were you still like affiliated with like Arizona, for instance, during that time at all? Or like was there kind of crossover with that as well?
Yeah, so Arizona obviously handled the pandemic very different than New York, meaning that we were still doing like outdoor skates and stuff like that. Whereas, like, I think that the more democratic states had like tighter constricts when it came to pandemic restrictions. Like we would still do virtual skate sessions together, meet team meetings. I ended up doing a couple of skate marathons. I got really into park skating because Arizona has some amazing skate parks. Really just try to do anything to stay in skating physical shape.
Mhm.
Was that your first foray into park skating, or had you dabbled before?
No, let me tell you. I would I would not skate outside. Like, I was, like, such a little, like, "La, la, la, everything has to be I only want polished concrete. I only want, like, perfect floors," right? So skating outside was not in my wheelhouse at all.
And what were those early days of introducing yourself to half pipes, quarter pipes, etcetera, like?
So my signature move was we called it, the splat because I would, like, just try to, like, ride into a bowl and just, like, splat against the wall like a bug.
Oh my god.
Um, it was a very, interesting time in my life,
Yeah.
but I loved it. It was fun, and then one of my teammates, Goldie, actually, put in a half pipe in her backyard, and so we started, like, just skating that all the time.
Nice. Coveted backyard half
Yeah.
pipe. Oh my god.
Ugh, I know.
Are you still park skating now, or have you given it a break in favor of roller derby training?
Definitely giving it a break. Yeah, I do miss it though. It's funny because like I've been so focused on, in season. We're just wrapping up. We have one more Gotham travel team game to do, and then I can go back to trying out park skating again. But it felt very much like one or the other
Mhm.
when it ended up being like in season.
Mhm.
And I mean, since my signature move is a splat, I definitely think that, staying away from it in season is probably good for me.
Yeah.
I love that so much. I was kinda similar, like, when I was skating really competitively, I was like, "I wanna park skate, but, like, if I hurt myself here." First of all, I'll never forgive myself, second of all, my team will never forgive me, so I was sort of like, "Let me not try to do all
I
that."
know, I know, I know. So my partner Sam was actually, first off, I just have to say Sam is an amazing skater in anything. They're like ice. They love rollerblading. They just finished their tryouts with Gotham. So like they're, you know, when it comes to skating. So they took to the skate park like nothing. They're like running around doing 180s off of the coping, and I was like, a touch. Like it was very different experience for us. And I think because they're so good at it, my competitive nature is like, well, I need to be good too. Like, so just like simply being around them pushes me to even do it more.
Mhm.
Um, and we've already been talking about, well, I mean, it's time to go to the skate park again.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Did you meet Sam through roller derby?
I did. I was their coach, which
Oh.
sounds so no, it sounds so scandalous, but it's not scandalous. Sam started at Arizona State University's roller derby team. They had a small
I forgot they
team.
had a team, that's right. Ugh.
It's
Collegiate
so
roller
small.
derby, whoa.
So then they wanted to like do it more competitive, so they came over to Arizona roller derby, and yeah, and that's where we met.
Hmm.
Aw.
Hmm.
What are some ways that roller derby has lived up to your vision of it, and what are some ways in which it has let you down?
Oof, that's such a good question. So I think that when I found roller derby, I was searching for a community, and I definitely found that. I found, some of my closest friends, my spouse, like I like the people that have entered my life post roller derby have made my life so much better in just so many ways, right? The support, the love. And on the flip side, I think that roller derby has disappointed me in almost a false advertisement of how progressive the sport is. There's still a lot of issues that we need to work through as a community, and whether that's how we treat our skaters of color, how we treat our trans folks, how we treat just each other in some competitive aspects.
Mm.
There's a lot of ways that we can improve kind of a more narrow vision that the community currently has. Yeah.
Hmm. Do you have any thoughts on some of the things that you want to see change, but also like maybe how you see some of that change happening, or yeah, things that you would like to see shift?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, so something that's really heavy on my mind, and maybe it's because I've been reading some posts, some Reddit posts, unfortunately, Reddit roller derby, about people's feelings of saying that their perspective is feminism, but this person is actually very anti-trans, and like posting about how the roller derby community is no longer women oriented, and just kind of this like very transphobic rhetoric that happens online, but in the guise of, oh, I'm just championing women, right?
Hmm.
And so that has been weighing very heavily, because just there's been a lot of that conversation happening, and I feel that roller derby isn't the space for you to be exclusionary. And if we're going to tell the world that we're progressive, and we include everyone and we see all perspectives, well, we need to make sure that we are seeing all perspectives, right? And so it like starts with education. How do we educate our skaters, our officials? How do we educate ourselves on like these biases that we have, or just like bringing that into the sport? How do we open the minds and the hearts of our skaters? And I really think that's through education, and that falls on the league to provide that.
Hmm. Hmm. Like
Yeah.
kind of the idea, if I'm hearing you correctly, of kind of like if you know better, you can do better in some instances in terms of just trying to like
Yeah.
shift people's thoughts and ideas about various topics, like right, like trans stuff, like racism, etc. More or less, is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Because we have people coming from all walks of life, sometimes when they join the roller derby community, like they've never experienced anyone from the LGBTQ community, period. And so, like, how do we embrace that person while educating them in a way that feels authentic
Hmm.
to our community, instead of just kind of like forcing a rhetoric on them, if that makes sense?
Hmm.
It feels like a really challenging conversation too, from the perspective of, I've seen a lot of that same
Mhm.
stuff that you describe on Reddit, and people will be saying these blatantly turfy things, but they also think they're part of the
Mm.
solution, and that they're including people whilst they're saying turfy things. And I don't know how to bridge the gap and have those conversations with those people that are like, no, I'm inclusive. I'm not transphobic. And it's just I the cognitive dissonance it's very, very real.
Yes. Yes, it is, right? It's like kind of that old, "Well, my best friend is gay.
Yeah.
I could never be homophobic." Like, "How what are you talking about?"
I
It's
watched
like,
Transparent.
my
I'm like, don't even get me started.
Oh
Oh my
god, no, no.
god.
I also have a black neighbor, and he's really nice.
Screaming.
It's like, okay.
Screaming.
My my cousin married a black man,
Yeah.
like, this is totally fine. Like
I'm gonna scream and
Oh,
die.
yeah. Yeah.
uh
A lot of that.
Yeah, it's really hard because one of the things that I think about with all of that is the ways that like, because you're kind of talking about culture. We're talking about basically like
Mm,
how do we build a culture within the sport of inclusion, and not just inclusion in like the reactive sense of like, yeah, you can be here, but inclusion in the sense of like, no, you belong here. But we're also talking about doing it for a sport that is worldwide, which also exists in all of these other different pockets, which have their own cultural things going on, whether it's like American culture or like the culture of a state or a city. And then like you're talking now, we're going with borderless teams. So it's like this thing where it's also like, yeah, how do we sustain that culture across all of these different sort of barriers in certain ways as well? And it starts to become like a, for me at least, at times it has felt like an impossibility because I've seen so many of
Mm.
the people that are trying to have the conversations and doing the work and kind of feeling like at times it can be stalled. And it, yeah, I'm like also very curious for you of how you sort of sustain like hope among that and how you sort of engage with the idea of so this sort of cultural shift. Yeah. And how do you kind of keep yourself moving forward with it?
So I think a lesson from my ancestors and most indigenous cultures, we have this resiliency, right? Because we come from a line of people that, I mean, the colonizers tried to eradicate, hands down, whether it's through genocide or it's through the reduction of resources. When you know that for generations, your people have fought to be here, like you have this built in, almost like compass saying that you can keep going.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like it's going to be hard and like just keep pushing. I hate to say it, the aloha spirit.
Yeah.
But like that's what it is. Like it's this like innate feeling of like I need to connect to more people so that we can all move forward together in like a loving, kind way. And like just tapping back into like I can see throughout my family's history and what they've been through that every time they've had to push. And I just feel like this is my push.
Mm.
And it's to like show up in the Derby community and be like, here I am, like an indigenous, queer, Māhū skater. And that's like what I'm going to bring to the table. And I hope that you'll have a conversation with me. I hope that we can sit down and we can talk about all these facets of humanity together. You know what I mean? And it's just like, I don't think that my voice is going to be in like some like broad, overreaching way, but I think that the individual conversations and connections can make a huge difference just like in growing our community.
Hmm. I think those individual relationships are the places where transformation can happen because there is a relationship. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? And
I agree.
that's kind of how it can happen. And I think so much of what you're saying touches back also to, I think it seems like the community building pieces of building teams together, building a tournament together, like
Mhm.
exactly what you're speaking to, which is some of the connection piece as well. Yeah, very beautifully stated. Thank you for sharing that with us.
And speaking to the strength that you draw from your ancestors, I'm thinking a lot about how Team Indigenous Rising is comprised of Indigenous people from all over and how those collective
Mhm.
schools of thought must come together. What is that like? What has that meant to you in terms of facilitating all of the amazing work that y'all are doing?
I think that so our communities have been very isolated.
Hmm.
We're in different pockets of the world, and I think because we come together and we do have these conversations about like not just like our lived experiences, but we are constantly talking about our ancestors and about like our cultural beliefs and how those push us forward. And so like with Team Indigenous, it's like every time that I am able to talk to one of my siblings, I grow from that conversation. And like now when I move to another conversation, I can tap into that and be like, oh, well, my teammate experienced this. Have you ever thought it from this perspective? And it's like, because what the Kanaka, the Hawaiian people experience is vastly different from other indigenous populations, right? Because we were brought in as a state, so people see it as like, what are you talking about? Hawaii is a part of the US, when it's like, no, sorry, the Kingdom of Hawaii is its own sovereign nation. We were recognized throughout the world. And like the fact that our monarchy was our last queen was imprisoned until she abdicated her throne by the US government, and like these things aren't talked about. And now like my Team Indigenous siblings have that understanding, and they take forth that perspective of the Kanaka people and are able to talk about it with others. And I feel the same with, with their stories. Like, it's just emboldens me even more to speak about these like issues that are present.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking so much also, yeah, just about like the power of story and relationship in general. I think that's just like really hitting me in a big way through some of what you're sharing and some of the conversation we're having.
Yeah, oral storytelling is how we passed our knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So we call it a talking story. So like, when you're kikiing with somebody, like before that, we would just be like, "Oh, we're talk story," and that was like how we would just like passed everything on, and how we kept the because and this is where it gets a little complicated. So our culture was outlawed in the late 1800s. We weren't allowed to dance. Our religion was taken away from us. We weren't allowed to speak our language until the United States in the 70s said that it was okay to have our culture back. So like during that time period, the only way that we kept it going was through story, was through talking with each other and connecting with each other, and then things done in secret, right? Like uh I can remember, being like this tiny little human, and my great grandmother is playing on her ancient record player these like really terrible Hawaiian songs. And I say terrible because they kept skipping,
Oh.
like not terrible in the music themselves, but like the record itself was really terrible. And so like I'm learning to dance, and then now as an adult looking back and thinking about, she had to learn those dances in secret, and then she passed that on to, here I am 4 generations later, right? Like learning from her. Even if it was a terrible record, it was still like the fact that I got to experience that when most Kanaka people lost that connection.
Yeah. And speaking of story and telling
Mm.
stories and whatnot, you're also a part of a documentary type production with Team Indigenous, correct? What
Yes,
has that
yes.
what has that been like?
S- Sorry, I'm laughing because it I never in a million years would say that it's in my personality to put myself in the forefront of a documentary. That's not somewhere I'm comfortable.
You're so engaging though.
But ah, thank you
True.
so much.
I'm
True.
like, okay, tell me more.
But the team at RollerCon, that was the first time the documentary crew came out, and they were like, a Montreal based, yeah, so it's very cool. But they're a Montreal based crew, and then they really wanted to like dive in deep to the team, but not just like the team and our mission, but also like our personalities and who we are as skaters off the track. So they're going to highlight 3 individuals, and I happen to be one of the individuals. And I think a lot of that has to do with living in New York City and kind of putting my art in this wild art industry world here.
Mhm.
And so I had a show, and they came and they filmed the show, and now they're actually coming to Denver with us, and they are getting even more footage. So it's just been intensive, but at the same time empowering, because oh my gosh, you think that our stories are so powerful, you want to put them in a documentary and then put them all over Canadian public TV. Like, that's just wild to me that you think that we are that powerful. I mean, like, hell yeah, we are that
You are that
powerful, you
Yeah.
know?
powerful. 100%. No, that's so cool.
I'm really excited to see it once it comes to fruition. I'm
Mhm.
excited for that.
I'm like, of course I want to watch it, but at the same time, I'm like,
Yeah.
seeing yourself in film.
Yeah. Well, everyone else is gonna love it. It's always hard to watch yourself, though. I
Mhm.
agree. So you mentioned your art a little bit and breaking
Mm.
into the New York City art scene and all that good stuff. But I kind of want to start at the beginning with your art stuff. How did you discover that stained glass was your medium?
So, first off, I would never, ever say that I am an artist. Before stained glass. And it actually took me a couple years to be like, I am an artist. But before glass, I was a metal worker in the Air Force. So I did machining and welding for the airframes, and I knew that I would never touch those skills once I left the military. It's just not an environment that I would knowingly put myself into. And next thing I know, I see an Instagram of stained glass, and I was like, what is this? And it was somebody cutting glass, and I was so into it, like, what? And so I just like started doing like a deep dive of everything stained glass, and I taught myself, and I watched some tutorials, and I stalked some people on Instagram, and then the the way that glass and metal move are so similar. So, like in the techniques that I would use to cut metal, because just like glass, metal wants to move in a straight line. So, when you're cutting it, to manipulate that is like the tricky part. And like welding turned into soldering. And then next thing I know, I'm showing work in a New York City art gallery. Like, who am I?
Yes, that's so cool.
But
Cool.
there are a lot of financial barriers to getting into stained glass. It is a very expensive endeavor, not just like the cost of glass, which is expensive, but also the amount of tools that you need. Oh my gosh, it's really expensive. And my first set of tools were gifted to me from Sam's family because Sam's aunt was an old stained glass artist. And I know,
Whoa.
just, I know. So, like, they gifted me the tools, and then we were off to the races.
Meant to be.
Yeah, truly, truly, that's definitely
Mm.
giving meant to be. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, I love that so much. Plus there's something so to me at least, something very special about a handed down tool set. Like I have my dad's old like
Oh,
toolbox with all of
yes.
his tools and that he gifted that to me when I opened my roller skate shop. And I've just kept that set very near and dear to me ever since. It felt like a very special thing of like, oh, your hands did so many things with these, and now my hands get
Yes.
to do so many things with these. And yeah, that's cool.
I love that. Yes. So, Sam, my brilliant Dr. Babe, is an academic through and through. So Sam's dad gifted me their grandfather's vice
Oh.
and like handed down a hammer. And like, I know these things sound so strange, but like, I knew I was welcome into the family when I started getting tools,
Hmm.
right? Like hand down tools. And it felt so like, you really see me.
That's special.
I have to
Hmm.
ask,
I know.
where do you keep all of these tools in your New York apartment, or do you have a studio, or
So we have a 3-bedroom, and
Mm,
one of the bedrooms is just my studio.
cool,
That's the
cool.
Mhm.
dream. That's
I
the
know.
artist's dream, the artist slash academic dream. We have a home studio.
Yeah. So it's good and it's bad because, like when time crunch happens, I will stay in here until 2 in the morning and be like, I have to work, I have to work. But I mean, I love it, right? You're passionate about it. So good and bad, trying to find that balance.
Ah, the dream. The dream. Yeah, I'm like, I want a room for like all my drag shit where I can like also like do some rehearsal stuff and I can like have a little vanity, keep my makeup in there out of my
Yes.
bathroom where it always gets weird and gross. I'm like, ooh, the dream.
Right. Like like shelving unit just for your wigs. Mm.
Exactly that. I'm like, let me mount these on the wall. Let's go. Um, yeah, but I imagine, do you find it also hard then sometimes when there isn't a time crunch to get the work done because you're at home?
Oh, absolutely. I have the cutest cats ever, and they're so distracting if I don't have a time crunch.
That has been the struggle for me historically as well. I'm like, there's a cat, there's my things. How could I
Yeah.
possibly get my work done?
Yes.
Productivity and studio space aside, I want to chat a little bit about your subject matter. So, you often use your art to create a
Mm.
dialogue around issues close to your experiences and your heart. Is there any one piece or series of pieces that feels especially meaningful or close to you?
Yes. So I try to tell the Kanaka stories. So, for example, my first piece that I showed in like a legit gallery was the creation story of the Hawaiian Islands. And it was about two goddesses and their battles, which created our islands. And so the pieces were depicting the two goddesses and then like how they formed the islands in glass. And that one spoke so deeply to me because it was the first time that I felt like I could tell a cultural story and have it reach so many people who have never perhaps thought about the deeper meaning of Hawaii. Right? Like they're like, I'm going on vacation. Yay, it's so fun. It's so cool. And then I wanted them to see my pieces and be like, oh, there's so much more to it. This, like, I wish I would have learned more when I was there and took the time to understand, the people of the land. That's my hope, anyways. And then the second piece that's like so near and dear to my heart was it's a piece on violence against Indigenous women,
Mhm.
and that in that piece, I'm asking the audience to put themselves within my perspective, and so the glass was of my face silhouette, but my face is mirror. So when the audience members looked into it, they would be, like their face would be within my braids in the
Mm.
glass. And that piece was surrounded by 571 red teardrops, which represent each teardrop represents 10 missing or murdered women
Mhm.
at this time. And I wanted it to feel overwhelming. Like, I wanted you to stand amongst that, like, horrible statistic and see yourself and try to imagine that this is the daily life for some people to carry that weight. That's actually the show opening that the documentary crew filmed.
Mm.
So yeah, we'll be able to see that one. And I think after that piece, I had to step away from heavier cultural
Mhm.
pieces just because I needed a moment because that piece was so heavy. Within the exhibit, you can scan a QR code and then you hear me talking and I'm telling the audience statistics that Indigenous women face, were 10 times more likely to be murdered than any other ethnicity. Like there's just like so many staggering like facts out there that maybe people don't piece together or even realize is happening.
Mhm.
Yeah, that piece. I think that piece will probably linger for a long time in me.
Mhm. You mentioned earlier having you have a commission piece now that seems a little bit bigger. Are you typically working on sort of larger projects like this and perhaps like more the independent type of work that you're putting out, like the project that you just mentioned? Are you typically making smaller kind of items? What is that balance like with your art?
Yeah, I personally love big pieces. I love working with big glass. I love, just like the light and shadow play that happens. During the market season, will do little cute pieces like here's a cute frog or here's a cute non-binary flag, stuff like that to kind of like just tap into that cute joy that glass can be. But when I'm representing myself on a bigger scale, like in like a gallery setting, I really do like to go big. I just feel the impact more when it's a larger scale thing,
Hmm.
for sure.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I could see that. I think that makes a lot of sense. At Five Stride, we have some of your work and we have like ones that have like roller skates in them and whatnot. Do you tend to regularly have roller skate product? And also, like with your pieces, for listeners, do you sell them anywhere online? Can people come check out what you have and grab some stained glass pieces from you?
So typically, my stuff sells in the galleries.
Mhm.
I don't know. I will do commissions. I do love to do commissions for people. Like I'm doing a birthday piece right now that's really sweet, and it's just like some rainbows and some adorable cats, stuff like that. I don't have an online store because it is hard to ship glass.
Mhm.
It is a whole different process to like have to take care of that. And then like the insurance, like it's just like a whole different beast.
Mhm.
So like normally it's just local based things.
Mhm.
I would like to get more into selling online, but honestly, the best way to get a commission is just to like slide into those DMs.
You heard it here, folks. Slide into those DMs.
Oh no.
We'll put a link to your Instagram
Uh,
in the show notes.
You mentioned earlier with what seemed like a level of sort of disbelief slash like what is happening in terms of sort of getting into the New York City art scene. Can you say a little bit more about kind of your experience in New York City versus were you doing stuff with stained glass in Arizona? Were you doing things with stained glass elsewhere? How do these things differ? What has that transition been like for you?
so when the pandemic happened and I stepped away from such a intensive derby schedule, I really just like dove into stained glass. And so before we moved to New York, I only did one show in Arizona, and it was like such a good experience and like so validating, and like it was just really great. And then when I came to New York City, I just started answering open calls. In fact, the first show I did in New York City was like it was like a feminist erotica themed show, and I was like, well, we're diving in. And so I did these like shibari stained glass pieces
Whoa.
and some yoni stained glass pieces, and it was just like very not what you think that stained glass is going to be. And that kind of just like put me in a different type of glass artist, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So like when I started to do more and more shows, it just like really opened up into like a realm of I want to make stuff that you've never seen. Like, I don't want you to see my work and think, oh, this would be so beautiful in a church or in a Victorian house. I want you to look at my work and be like, oh my God, that is so queer. That is so, strange and so like in depth, or just like more complexity than florals, and which are fun, but like I want to tell the stories and I want you to see something different. And I think that being so different has helped open up doors with my
Mhm.
art, because we you don't see it even in New York, which is wild.
Mhm. Mhm.
Do you have a lot of stained glass peers here in New York City? I'm not super familiar with the stained glass art scene.
I don't know anyone.
Okay.
I'm literally
You're like, I'm alone out
the
here.
only one that I know.
You are the scene.
But I did start taking glass blowing
Mhm.
courses at Urban Glass. So my thought is that I want to be able to take sand and I want to transform it all the way into a stained glass piece. Like I want to control from the moment that it's melted and turned into molten glass to like the moment that it's hanging on a wall in a gallery.
Mm.
And so like I started to like learn how to blow glass, and those are kind of like my only glass friends so far. And we're all just like little baby glass blowers that don't really know what's going on but still think it's super cool.
That's a cool spot to be in though, where everything is new and exciting, and I just really am hearing that you've done a lot in your life in general, and you've picked up a lot of different things,
Mm.
and between your art and your military service, your roller derby career, and even skating in marathons like you mentioned, I'd imagine all of these pursuits require a great deal of discipline. How do you cultivate the focus to be so amazing?
Or I'm not sure I'm focused. I don't know if that's like the word for me.
You're like questionable.
Even
I
if
don't
it
know.
comes in bursts, it's still
I
focus.
Yeah. I think I give more like chaotic gremlin
Okay,
vibes
okay.
than focused vibes. No,
Had me fooled.
seriously, so the I when I joined the military I was 18.
Mhm.
So I was just a baby, like and then having kind of that like very regulated time period um it just like made me function in a way where like I have to complete these tasks, I have to complete these tasks, and I think that that still carries over. So a lot of like the things that I do is task based to get an
Mhm.
outcome because that's what works for me. Because otherwise, if it's just like we could go to the gym here or here or here, I will pick none of the above, even though I love working out. I'll be like, let's just go for a walk around the neighborhood. Right. And it's simply because I have to have that like if you want to achieve this, you need to do this type
Mm.
of mind frame.
Mm.
Yeah. So because otherwise it's all over the place.
Also, how do you balance all of these undertakings while being a mother?
So, I just love my kids, sorry. First off, my girls are full on adults out there living their lives, making their decisions, just like being amazing humans, right? And then my son is the only one that's still home with us. So he's kind of, but I mean, again, he is almost 17. So he's definitely like in that stage where he wants independence and he wants to like kind of like explore the boundaries of his world. So my mom duties has definitely been reduced a lot. And I think that that's the only way that I can keep up with everything. But I mean, when I had my kids, it was, me raising three babies while on active
Whoa.
duty, like when I would deploy, they would go to my dad's house like during that time period. You know what I mean? So like it's always been a heavy load of like things that I have to do during my time.
Mm.
And I think that as like the motherhood stuff decreased, or just not decreased, but like shifted in what I had to do, my other interests came in more. And that's been it has been like a transitional period to like really like delve into like who I am and who I want to become as I shift into this next phase
Mm.
where my children are gone out there in college living their best lives.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the transition because that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, oh, like they're sort of in that transition period. And I'm hearing you talk about like in your engagement with Team Indigenous, the glass things. And it sort of is like, oh, yeah, like it sounds like in some ways you're already in the process of that kind of like what's next for you in your own life as there's more spaciousness for these different parts of you. So I don't know. I'm excited to see what's next. Like,
Well, I can tell you one thing that I'm working on that I'm very, very excited and I know is going to take a lot of my time is I am working on a proposal for my gallery to host an all Indigenous artist show.
oh, hell yeah.
And I know I'm very excited about the prospect and like just like really diving into like what that could look like because it's not something that's done. And I think that having the platform of Team Indigenous has shown me that like I can create these spaces even in the art world, even in New York City's art scene. I can create something that's for the Indigenous people. And like what would it mean, right, to an individual who's living in Kansas, right? To be able to say that I'm an Indigenous artist showing in New York City.
Mhm.
Like I want to be able to like give that platform so that so many others can share their story. I'm very excited about it.
Hell
I
yeah.
got chills hearing that. That's so powerful. Like, I was just imagining being that artist in Kansas, and yeah. Wow. I love that.
Mhm.
'Cause I'm not from here either, and I'm just picturing, growing up in little Rhode Island and having someone invite me to be in a show in New York, like, yeah, it's so cool.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
And then to just like be able to take it to native communities and be like, hey, y'all, here's something that we can all do together.
Mhm.
Like, let's go. Let's like show the world and let's show up.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked.
I'm claiming that for you. I'm like, that proposal's gonna go through. They're gonna say yes, and you're
How
gonna be
could it
well on your
not,
way.
right? How could it not?
I know.
Yeah. I mean, it's at this point, it's just kind of like the formality of
Perfect.
submitting the approval. Like everybody's pretty much on board, and oh God, I'm so
Hell
excited.
yeah.
So to me, I'm hearing a lot of self-actualization, a lot of self-discovery, both through your experiences
Mhm.
in roller derby and also your experiences as an artist. Through all of these transitions and periods of growth, what have you learned about yourself and who you are?
I think for a big portion of my life, my some of the traumatic experiences that I've had dictated who I was. And I think that after I left the military and I was able to focus on my mental health and really kind of untangle a lot of core beliefs and things that were put on me, not necessarily things that I chose. I think it was like kind of underneath all of that I found this resilient, creative, strong mother, because I am very motherly to not just my children, but like my teammates, just kind of like, like I want to take care of everyone. And like finding out who I was under those layers has been such an empowering journey, because and I will oh, I can't believe I'm doing it. I'm going to tie it back to Derby, but like Derby gave me the space to own my strength.
Mhm.
It said, "You can go as hard as you want and we're going to love you for it." And that transitioned off the track. So now in my life, I can go as hard as I want and these people are still going to love me. And I think that like that untethered me in a way, because all of a sudden I met this amazing human who I would never have thought I was good enough for.
Mhm.
And now I'm like, no, I can date this person and they are the love of my life. And then I, transfer to a league that's seen as one of the best in the world. And I am good enough to skate with them. I am like strong enough. And same with Team Indigenous. I am Indigenous enough to speak about these things. You know what I mean? Like, all of these experiences have just shown me like I am more than enough.
Mm.
And that's something that I didn't understand until I was in my 30s.
That's really
Mm.
powerful stuff.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Damn.
Mhm. Mhm.
I know, all in this little tiny 5'1" self.
I don't even remember you being that small. I've met you in person.
You know what? Everybody
5'1".
tells me I thought you were bigger.
Yeah. Powerful presence.
Mm.
So, we actually have a question here from one of your peers and teammates from Gotham, a one Roxy Dallas. Uh, it was her last day at the skate shop, and we happened to be working together before she moved over to Portland
Mhm.
to play for Rose City.
Mm.
And I was like, "Wait, before the end of the day, do you have any questions for Kapulani?" And she thought long and hard about it and was sort of reflecting on all these different stories about you, but she was just talking about different moments where you like really asserted yourself and stepped into, your power and stood up for yourself. So it kind of reflects on what you were just saying as what your experience has been in claiming your power. But anyway, yeah, we have a question from Roxy Dallas, which is um, thinking back on your roller derby career, do you have a favorite teammate moment?
Oh. God, that's so
That's
difficult.
a hard
Just
one.
because, oh my gosh, there's so many amazing souls that have been like brought into my life with Derby. Okay, I do have one very special moment. So my home team in Arizona, the Surleys, we won the state championship And there's this very specific moment where Sam and I are holding up the trophy because we were teammates. So like I got to like here's the state champion trophy, like trophy with the love of my life, and we're just like cheesing and we're like sweaty. I'm missing half an eyebrow. Like it's a terrible picture, but it's like such a lovely moment to be like, we worked so hard and we did this thing as teammates, on the track and off the track. Like, yeah, that one's really magical. Oh man, there's so many good. Oh, I could go on forever about the good people. I'm going to stick with that one though. Is my favorite moment.
Amazing, amazing.
I genuinely love Roxy, and I'm so happy that she put a question in. Roxy was like my first friend when I moved to New York City. Just kind of like came to my first show and like invited me to Five Stride. Like it was just so welcome and open arms to this new random ass skater.
Yeah.
And so nice. Yeah.
Roxy, I love her.
No,
Such a good
I
egg.
know I'm gonna miss Roxy.
I could definitely see where you both would connect, though. You're both very emotive people, and you also have that common ground of obviously roller derby, but also she likes making knives and you like making glass, and you both partake in a little puff puff here and there. So it's like, yeah, you guys have a lot in common.
I mean, my name is Hawaiian Blaze.
I love it so much.
Cat lovers.
Cat lovers.
Yes, cat lovers.
Meant to be. Meant to be. How synchronous your life is, thinking about all of it.
Honestly, yeah. Wait, what? That's so wild.
It all falls into place where you're involved.
I know, it's wild. Sometimes, like, I almost felt when we started the interview, I was gonna be like, strap in, folks. This is gonna be a wild journey. Like, my life is so many twists and turns, but yeah.
I love it.
I do. I'm like, mine's very similar. Like, a lot of people don't know a lot of shit about the things I've done in my life in terms of just a lot of different accomplishments that are all seemingly kind of divorced from one another. So it's always kind of strange when someone's like, oh, like tell me about this thing or that thing, and like a lot of things are connected. I'm always like, oh god, like where do I start? Or like I don't even know how to like wrap it up and deliver it to you. I'm not even like sure. So I really have an appreciation for people that are kind of like, let me just explore all these different things and like go these different directions and like learn about myself in the process. And it kind of seems like that's very much who you are in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely.
I think this has been one of my favorite interviews. I've felt very moved by your perspective. Like, it's having a physical effect on me. I've had a couple of chills. I've had a couple of times where I felt like tearing up. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, and I'm glad that we were able to link up and make this work tonight with all of our schedules and everything. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, very grateful for your presence. Very grateful for your sharing. Thank you
your
for
energy
us.
it's something. It's really something.
It's honestly been such a joy talking with you all. Like, I already knew, and I've told Sam this several times, that we're friends. And Sam's like, you've never actually hung out with them. And I'm like, no, but we're friends.
But we're friends, though.
We are.
We're friends. It's true.
We're friends, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, we're gonna post links to Team Indigenous stuff. We're gonna post links to your art, your stuff. We're gonna make sure to include all of that for listeners so that folks can find you out there on the interwebs, take a look at your art, find Team Indigenous, et cetera, et cetera. So listeners, y'all know what to expect. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Aloha.
Hey, Jasmine here. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We want to thank you for your continued support of the Skaterade podcast. And if you'd like to keep up with us, you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, as well as on Instagram at Skaterade Pod. Don't forget to give us a like, a follow, or leave a review to make it easier for folks to find our podcast. If you've done all of that and you want to show your support with a Skaterade sticker or patch, you can find links to scoop them up in our show notes and Instagram link tree. Thank you so much for all you do. Skate hard, have fun.